Hans, thanks so much for being with us today for this edition of In the Loop. We haven't talked to you for a while, so thank you today for being with us.
Yeah, glad to be back. Thanks.
Let me start off. This is your second year in your third term on the council, so you've been around for a little while. Yeah, you've been around for a little while. Talk a little bit about how things have changed. Your profile has kind of been raised a little bit more as a county leader.
Well, now I'm chairing a committee and chair of the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee, and I serve on the Transportation, Environment, Infrastructure Committee. It's a different cast of characters. We have 9 people, 4 new, a lot of council members who had been really big presences for a long time. They've transitioned out, and we have new people, new blood, new thinking, new creativity, new dynamics. It's a fun environment. I've always enjoyed it, but you always want to get along with your coworkers and feel like you're in an environment where you can get the most and you can bring your best. I think we are all, people who have a similar attitude towards one another, and it's a good environment.
That's great. You mentioned the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee. So we have a lot of topics in there that we can touch on. You're chair of that committee. Let's start with affordable housing. I know that's something that you're really passionate about. There was a bill passed last summer that deals with that very issue and changing the zoning requirements as it comes to affordable dwelling units.
This proposed zoning change is to address a lot of restrictions and barriers in our zoning ordinance as governing accessory dwelling units.
Talk a little bit about the challenges that you face getting that through, and in the end, what type of bill did we end up with?
Right. Well, Montgomery County is a really expensive place to live, and our biggest payment as residents, the biggest check we write typically every month is our rent or our mortgage. So anything we can do to make housing more affordable is going to make our community more affordable. So that is the big picture issue. This year we passed legislation that I proposed to allow people to build backyard cottages or basement apartments, the kind of housing that historically, was very popular, very common, but it was really banned effectively some decades ago. And we need to allow that kind of housing because there's a lot of neighborhoods that are, walking distance to metro, walking distance to job centers, but we're never going to build more housing there because the single family housing is built out, and that's, there's very limited opportunity to allow more people to live closer to jobs and to transportation. So by allowing homeowners to provide a unit on their property, we can get a lot more out of the scarce land that we have, and that kind of housing is always more affordable. It's always more affordable to live in a basement apartment than a neighborhood than to live in the house in the neighborhood. So I'm really pleased that we were able to enact that, and I think it's going to create a lot of opportunity for people to, whether they're retirees or young workers or lifetime residents. I think it's going to really help a lot of people.
The intent here is to try to establish an effective ordinance that will embrace accessory dwelling units as a good housing solution and not try to just simply regulate them out of existence as though they are a nuisance.
We're working on big ideas around housing now, around creating funding for the construction of housing. Montgomery County has been part of the Council of Governments housing policy strategy, and we have identified that as a region, we are not producing enough housing. The trajectory that we're on is really towards the West Coast, where jobs grow, housing does not grow, you end up with an affordable housing crisis. So we're trying to prevent that from happening. So if year after year after year you only produce a fraction of what you need, that contributes to your affordability problem. That makes this county, inaccessible and frankly, not inclusive. So I'm working hard on a financing strategy to support new construction of affordable housing, to unlock development at our metro stations, which is where we want it. We want high rises on metro. It's really an environmental goal, it's an economic development goal, it's a social goal. So I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to really move the needle this year and get this county back on track to produce the kind of housing that we need for economic development and for affordability, so that we will continue to be a place where young workers, have a place to live. This county did not get its share of millennial workers. We didn't get our share of millennials because we didn't have the housing for them. There was nowhere for them to live, and there weren't enough jobs. Housing production is a major part of that strategy.
Is this a type of legislation, if you're going to propose it, that you feel that you'll have the support of your colleagues?
I do. I think the council is really gets the housing issue. You know, I think you have new blood here. People aren't as stuck in the kind of the attitude about housing that was common decades ago that, you know, we don't need it. Keep it out of our community. Put the housing somewhere else. I think people on the council are generally understand that we all have a role to play here, and that actually new housing is good. It's good for everybody. So I'm optimistic we're going to make some big steps. And the fact that we had a unanimous vote on the accessory dwelling unit legislation was really indicative of council members being willing to take a stand on an important issue like housing.
And you mentioned economic development and jobs, which, you know, Montgomery County's been getting a little bit of a bad rap in the press lately about not being competitive with our neighbors. But yet I do see that we are creating a lot of jobs here. I think we're being a little bit hard on ourselves. But what are your thoughts on economic development and how we need to attract that talent and those jobs here to Montgomery County?
Well, I think we've got to work a lot harder. We are not producing the kind of jobs that we need to produce to support our quality of life.
We have a lot of strength in this county. We have tremendous economic potential, but there are some real challenges ahead of us.
If you look back over the past, what you see is that if 100 jobs were created in the Washington region, Montgomery County typically was creating about a third of them. That's the job engine that fueled the community that we know and love and all live in today. That number has changed as Northern Virginia has created this incredible juggernaut, as DC has really revitalized and become an incredible place to live and to work. I put forward a 5-point plan around economic development. It doesn't address every single issue, but I think there are 5 areas that will make a real difference. You know, our Purple Line, we have this incredible transportation asset coming in. We need to make the Purple Line our Roslyn-Ballston corridor, you know, an urban walkable environment that companies want to be in, that there's housing, great quality of life. Our tech talent, we have to have a tech talent pipeline coming out of Montgomery College, out of our universities.
2, 3.
Right into the kinds of companies that are driving economic growth and prosperity. So we need our companies to know that if they want to hire here, they're going to be able to get access to the kinds of workers that they need to grow. Right now, we're not quite there yet. We have federal labs, NIH, NIST, NIST, NOAA, FDA. For us, they're like Harvard and MIT and Stanford and Berkeley. We need to get entrepreneurship going from those labs. And that means economic development programs to kind of integrate with our federal labs. So I'm working on a number of initiatives now with NIH and the National Cancer Institute to support the thousands of researchers that we have at NIH. Some of them would like to start a company, and we need to basically be there to hold hands and help them take their invention and launch a company from it. So I think this is a really, really promising area for us to kind of build on our strengths. And, you know, again, we don't have to be Northern Virginia, but we do need to be a lot stronger than we are. And lastly, transit for the Upcounty. You know, we're competing with urbanized communities for jobs and economic development. We need to better urbanize more of our county through public transportation. The Quarter Cities Transitway, monorail, bus rapid transit. The Upcounty needs transit service. The idea that I'm most excited about is our MARC service. You know, we have a MARC train that goes from Boyd's, Germantown, Rockville. What I'm most excited about is our MARC service. So we have a MARC rail line that runs diagonally across Montgomery County, you know, proceeds to West Virginia, but Boyd's and Germantown and Rockville, Silver Spring. We have the opportunity to create commuter rail on MARC that is like the kind of commuter rail you see in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, where a huge share of the working population uses that kind of rail. That would be an incredible layer on top of our metro system. And you can actually have a one-seat ride from Boyd's or Germantown all the way into DC and even into Crystal City, National Landing, where Amazon HQ2 is going to be growing. So I am pushing hard now to get the state to commit to an investment in MARC rail so that we can have a real big expansion of that transit and create a real integrated region. And when Montgomery County is driving a dynamic region, you know, when we're part of the growth of our region, that's going to really create the kind of jobs that we need to support our quality of life.
Let's move on to our last topic that we're going to discuss today. You introduced the very first zoning text amendment for 2020. Am I correct in that?
I did, as a matter of fact.
And it deals with solar in our farming community and our ag reserve. Now, I know you're doing your part to reduce your carbon footprint. You drive an electric car.
Right.
We visited a gentleman in Tacoma Park who is doing his part and
Yeah.
has made his station all electric, which is great.
Very cool.
The governor recognized him. He got all kinds of accolades for
Yeah.
that.
A lot of the taxis are coming,
Yeah.
and they come here, stay here about 20-25 minutes.
Yeah.
They get 80% of charge,
Yeah.
and they're on their way.
And they're out.
You know?
People talk, we're environmentalists, we're for this, we're for that. But Dooley has put his money where his mouth is.
Talk a little bit about how this would work and why it's a good idea to do this. And I know you have Councilmember Craig Rice's support on this as well.
As well as Councilmember Hucker. We have to get out of the mode of thinking that each of us, through our small individual actions, can actually move the needle on climate change. It's not going to work. I have to tell you. We have to think at scale, and we have to think about solutions that are really emergency and crisis response solutions. The biggest thing that we can do to do our part to stop or slow climate change is to stop burning coal and stop burning gas, fracked gas, to fuel the energy in our power grid.
All charged up.
We have to stop that. We have to change that kind of energy, and we have to replace it with solar and wind. That's the only truly at-scale solution that's going to make a huge difference in the short term. So what I'm working on is part of our solar strategy. How do we shut down coal and fracked gas, replace it with solar? Well, the state has reviewed the numbers, and it's very clear that the only way to do that is for tens of thousands of acres of open land or farmland to be converted into solar fields. It's not something we would want to do if we weren't in an emergency, but what alternative do we have? And so I have proposed that 1,800 acres of our 100,000 acre agricultural reserve should be open for solar. And doing that would enable us to power about 50,000 homes from solar power. So it would be the biggest single step we've ever taken to reduce our emissions as a county. It would be over a 4% reduction in our emissions when all 1,800 acres is built out. So, it's that kind of thinking that I think is actually going to slow climate change and push against the crisis that we're in. But it's not easy. I know everybody wants someone else to solve the problem. That's why we have a problem, because nobody wants to pay the price. I think we all think if we could just get a plug-in electric vehicle, that would help. It's not going to help that much if the power that is plugging your vehicle is from burning coal. So we have to think about the grid itself and how to transform the grid. So I'm excited about this. I know it's controversial. County executive is opposing it, but I hope we'll get it done.
Yeah, that is a lofty goal. It is a big proposal, and the ag reserve is precious to a lot of people, and people don't want it touched. Is this going to be something that farmers, if it does pass, that farmers would participate in on a volunteer basis?
Sure, and we've heard from farmers who are supportive. I mean, some farmers are not, some farmers are. It has an acreage limit. So first of all, only 1,800 acres of the 100,000 acre reserve, but also the sites are only 10 to 12 acres. So the idea is a farming operation would just have a small piece that is solar. And then frankly, what that farmer then will have is a source of revenue to help with making the numbers work on their farm. So I've heard from a lot of farmers who say they would love to be able to have a small solar operation. It would make it more feasible for them to grow the kind of food, for example, that we eat at our table, the vegetables and the fruit, because that stuff is not profitable enough now for them to grow. So I think it will ultimately integrate nicely with the ag reserve, but it is a big change. But these are the kinds of changes that we have to make, or we're just not going to have a future.
Yeah, great. Well, Councilmember Hans Riemer, thank you for taking time to talk to us today. I'll look forward to see how all these proposals roll out, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you very much, Susan.